So, hello, welcome back to another episode of Neuroimmune Tactics podcast. Yes, we're going ahead with Andrew Huberman's, or the Huberman Lab podcast episode around alcohol. To be specific, what alcohol does to your body, brain, and health. Huberman Lab podcast number 86. If you also wanna check that out, I'm gonna give you the title also here. Not that I'm just talking shit there. You should trust me and whatnot, but no, here it is. I still do not know when this video was published, so excuse me. And yeah, let's see. I think that the latter part of the video is actually really interesting. I mean, all of it is really interesting since it's very well researched, first of all, and very well presented, as well as it is always the case with his stuff. But yeah, we are starting with gut, liver, brain axis, alcohol, gut microbiome, and probably inflammation. Then also how to replenish that, and or how to improve the gut microbiome. It's probably going to be about kimchi and sauerkraut and whatever. Then we're going to skip a bit of it and go ahead with probably kind of the last things of this episode. But yeah, anyway.
Well, I promise you I will also talk about some of the documented positive effects of alcohol. Although they are very few and far between, they do exist. But before I do that, I would be remiss if I didn't emphasize some more of the terrible things that alcohol does and the way that it does it. And for those of you that enjoy alcohol, I'd like to say I feel guilty about telling you this because I know how much some people enjoy a good drink every once in a while. And I say a good drink because some people do like the taste of alcohol. I suppose I lucked out in that I don't really like the taste of alcohol and that just puts me to sleep. But I know that people do enjoy it. And I do want to point out that there is zero evidence that, provided somebody is of drinking age, certainly not in the stage of brain development, that having one drink or two drinks every now and again, meaning every 3 or 4 weeks or once a month, that is not going to cause major health concerns or major health issues for most people. I suppose if you have zero or very little alcohol dehydrogenase, it might make you feel sick, but then you're probably not the kind of person that's going to be drinking at all. So again, if you enjoy alcoholic drinks, I'm not trying to take them away from you by any means. But you should know what drinking does.
I mean, yeah, not taking it away, of course, but I mean, it's just, scientifically speaking, it is just not good, period. As so many things as smoking as well as, and there are going to be some consequences when one is overdoing it with things. Period. This is what it is. I mean, there is nothing to argue about there. And of course, it is sad and bad and whatever that some people like it that much. And maybe he's actually also talking about there's a bit of reducing alcohol consumption. There is a bit of a section there. I'm actually curious what he's going to talk about there. Maybe it's going to be about hypnosis. Could actually be the case. If we're talking about an addiction, maybe a bit more, but we will see.
As if you're consuming it in this kind of typical chronic pattern, as we can now refer to it, which is that 1 or 2 a night or a few stacked up on Friday and maybe 3 or 4 on Saturday, this kind of pattern of drinking, which is quite common. And one of the more serious effects that we should think about is the impact on the so-called gut-brain axis, or for sake of today's discussion, the gut-liver-brain axis. I don't think the gut-liver-brain axis has ever been discussed on this podcast, maybe any podcast. Although the moment I say that, I'm going to, the gut-liver-brain axis, people are going to come after me with, I suppose, gut, liver, brain, and brains. In any event, you have a brain, you have a gut. That gut runs from your throat down to the end of your intestine. Your gut and your brain communicate by way of nerve cells, neurons, and nerve connections, the vagus nerve in particular, and by way of chemical signaling. Your gut also communicates by way of chemical signaling, and believe it or not, by way of neural signaling too, to your liver. And as we talked about earlier, the liver is the first site in which alcohol is broken down or metabolized into its component parts. The liver is also communicating with the brain through chemical signaling and neural signaling. So we have the gut-liver-brain axis. And what you find is that people who ingest alcohol at any amount are inducing a disruption in the so-called gut microbiome, the trillions of little microbacteria that take resident in your gut and that live inside you all the time and that help support your immune system and that literally signal by way of electrical signals and chemical signals to your brain to increase the release of things like serotonin and dopamine and regulate your mood, generally in positive ways. Well, alcohol really disrupts those bacteria. And this should come as no surprise. I mean, earlier we talked about this, and it's well known if you want to, sterilize something, you want to kill the bacteria, you pour alcohol on it. And I can remember scraping myself or cutting myself. I was always injuring myself when I was a kid. And, the moment they take out the peroxide, you're like, oh boy, here it comes. But if there's no peroxide around, and you've got a wound there and you need to clean it out, they'll use alcohol, which I do not recommend, by the way. And that's one of the harshest ways to clean a wound. But for centuries, thousands of years, really, alcohol has been used in order to clean things and kill bacteria. So alcohol kills bacteria, and it is indiscriminate with respect to which bacteria it kills. So when we ingest alcohol and it goes into our gut, it kills a lot of the healthy gut microbiota. At the same time, the metabolism of alcohol in the liver, which you now understand, that pathway involving NAD, acetaldehyde, and acetate, that pathway is pro-inflammatory. So it's increasing the release of inflammatory cytokines, things like IL-6, et cetera, tumor necrosis factor alpha. If you'd like to learn more about the immune system, we did an episode all about the immune system. You can find it at hubermanlab.com. It'll teach you all the basics of what are cytokines, what are mast cells, et cetera.
If you do not know about it, there is a section from the Huberman Lab website around the newsletter. So the, let's try to recall it. What's the name? Neural Network Newsletter, I think, NNN. And there is the whole newsletter is basically a summary of certain topics. And there might be a one about the immune system. I do not really know, but I think that there is one about the gut microbiome, and many actionable tools. It's, I think, just the actionable tools, just the things that that you then can use to leverage the knowledge and get healthier and better performing and whatever. Check it out. It is really good. There are also a few episodes that I did on them. So just, going through them and talking about the stuff that I was able to add there. But yeah, check it out. It's good.
In any event, all these pro-inflammatory molecules, those are being released. You've now got disruption of the gut microbiota. As a consequence, the lining of the gut is disrupted, and you develop, at least transiently, leaky gut. That is, bacteria that exist in the gut, which are bad bacteria, can now pass out of the gut into the bloodstream. So you've got a two-hit kind of model here. In biology, we talk about two-hit models. That is kind of a 1 + 1 = 4. And it's generally, when you hear two-hit, it's not a good thing. So you've got bad bacteria from partially broken down food moving out of the gut. The good bacteria in the gut have been killed. You might say, why doesn't the alcohol kill the bad bacteria in the gut? Well, the bad bacteria that are from partially digested food oftentimes escape the gut before the alcohol can disrupt them. And so now you've got leaks in the gut wall. You've got the release of this bad bacteria. You've got inflammatory cytokines and other things being released from the liver. And they are able to get into the brain through what's called a neuroimmune signaling. And what's really bizarre in terms of the way that this manifests in the brain, I mean, it's not the way I would have done it, but then again, as I always say, I wasn't consulted at the design phase, and anyone who says they did, you should be very skeptical of them. The net effect of this is actually to disrupt the neural circuits that control regulation of alcohol intake. And the net effect of that is increased alcohol consumption. So this is just terrible, right? I mean, so you're taking in something that disrupts two systems, the gut microbiota, and it disrupts it in two ways. It's killing the good gut microbiota, and it's allowing the bad bacteria to move from the gut into the bloodstream. You've also got pro-inflammatory cytokines coming from the liver, and those converge or arrive in the brain. And
so I'm having two questions now, two of which I do not know the answer for. The first is, as far as I know, and there's I think always like a bit of a, it's always quite a discussion if artificial sweeteners, for example, or especially since kind of this is the only thing that, you know, might be of interest to me beyond like, you know, in the whole field quite, you know, when it is about the gut. But apparently, yes, it is disrupting the gut microbiome. The question is it doing it in this, you know, two ways method thing, so that it actually becomes even more concerning, or is it just one of them? And even if it is just one of them, how bad is it quite then? Or does it really matter then? Since, I mean, if things are just, you know, going into my brain, and it kind of makes sense, you know, if I was alcohol, I would probably do it the same way. Like making sure that more of me exist for whatever reason, I actually do not really know why, by doing the things it does quite.
Create a system in which the neural circuits cause more drinking. That's a bad situation. And this is why people who drink regularly, even if it's not a ton of alcohol, again, of the sorts of patterns of drinking I talked about before, and certainly for those that are chronic heavy drinkers, what you end up with is a situation in which you have inflammation in multiple places in the brain and body, and the desire to drink even more and to further exacerbate that inflammation and the gut leakiness. So this is basically a terrible scenario for the gut-liver-brain axis. And it's especially prevalent in so-called alcohol use disorder. Again, people that are ingesting somewhere between 12 and 24 drinks per week. For those of you that are interested in learning more about the gut-liver-brain axis and in particular alcohol use disorder, I'll provide a link in the show. Learning more about the gut-liver-brain and the desire to drink even more and to further exacerbate drinkers of the sorts of patterns of drinking I talked about before, and certainly for those that are chronic heavy drinkers. Again, why the neural circuits cause arrive in the brain, kinds coming from the liver, and those converge or arrive in the brain and create a system in which the neural circuits cause more drinking. That's a bad situation. And this is why people who drink regularly, even if it's not a ton of alcohol, again, of the sorts of patterns of drinking I talked about before, and certainly for those that are chronic heavy drinkers, what you end up with is a situation in which you have inflammation in multiple places in the brain and body, and the desire to drink even more and to further exacerbate that inflammation and the gut leakiness. So this is basically a terrible scenario for the gut-liver-brain axis. And it's especially prevalent in so-called alcohol use disorder. Again, people that are ingesting somewhere between 12 and 24 drinks per week. For those of you that are interested in learning more about the gut-liver-brain axis and in particular alcohol use disorder, I'll provide a link in the show note captions. There's a wonderful review on this that details that. But on the positive side, it points to the possibility that at least some of the negative effects of alcohol consumption, whether or not you're somebody who's currently ingesting alcohol or who used to ingest alcohol and is trying to so-called repair these systems of the brain and body, whether or not replenishing the gut microbiota is going to be beneficial. And we know that there are ways to do that, and we know that there's at least some promise for the ability for the system to repair itself. How does one do that? Well, I've talked before about this on the podcast, but studies done by colleagues of mine at Stanford, Justin Sonnenberg, who's been on this podcast as a guest, an amazing episode all about the gut microbiome, and his collaborator, Chris Garner, also at Stanford School of Medicine, have explored not alcoholism, but what are ways to improve the gut microbiota, in particular to reduce the production of inflammatory cytokines and to adjust what's called the inflammatome. You've heard of the genome and the proteome, et cetera. Well, the inflammatome is the total array, or at least the near total array of genes and proteins that control inflammation. How can you reduce inflammation and make that inflammatome healthier? Well, they've shown that 2 to 4 servings of fermented foods per day, and here I'm not.
There we go. Sauerkraut, kimchi, and anything else.
Referring to fermented alcohol, I'm talking about low sugar fermented foods, so things like kimchi, sauerkraut, natto for those of you that like Japanese food. There are others.
I don't know what natto is. Let's see what natto is. Natto. Atto, yeah, that's definitely what I wanted to find. Natto. Spelled as natto in standard English language, use is a traditional Japanese food made from whole soybeans that have been fermented with bacillus. Bacillus. Yeah. Whatever this is, I don't know, and this is what it looks like. Actually pretty gross, to be honest. Natto recipe. Natto with rice. Natto gohan. Japanese fermented soybeans on maybe rice and spring onions. No. Oh yeah, spring onion. I thought that there is another word for spring onion. I guess there actually is. Nevertheless. Anyway, whatever.
I know things like kefir, things like yogurts that have a lot of active bacteria. Again, low sugar varieties of all these things. Those are terrific at reducing inflammatory markers and at improving the gut microbiome. One could imagine that either inoculating oneself from some of the effects of alcohol, although I'd prefer that people just not drink alcohol chronically, frankly, or if somebody's trying to repair their gut microbiome because they ingested a lot of alcohol or because they had a lot of these inflammatory cytokines for many years or even a short period of time, regular ingestion of 2 to 4 servings of these fermented foods can be quite beneficial. I want to make it clear that has not been examined specifically in the context of alcohol use disorder, but because a huge component of the negative effects of alcohol use disorder are based in this gut-liver-brain axis and disruption of the gut microbiome and the inflammatory cytokines.
Let's talk about the positive effects of alcohol. And I do really quickly want to show you. You see the timeline here on the very bottom of the video, both of this video and this video. It is, well, it is, maybe 2 minutes. Which is 2 hours. It's not that much. You know, the whole video is 2 hours. This little tiny fucking section around, are there any positive effects of alcohol? Besides, you know, being able to, you know, use it for cleaning and whatnot. Let's see.
Tonight, or whether or not that's condensed to weekend use. I know a number of people are going to ask, perhaps are screaming, is drinking good for me in any way? For instance, many people have probably heard that resveratrol is good for people and that red wine is enriched in resveratrol. I hate to break it to you, but the reality is that if indeed resveratrol is good for us, and there's some debate about this, some people say strongly yes, some people say no, other people say maybe, the amount of red wine that one would have to drink in order to get enough resveratrol, in order for it to be health promoting, is so outrageously high that it would surely induce other negative effects that would offset the positive effects of resveratrol.
But it's still really interesting to see that people from the blue zones, as far as I remember, I don't know if this is like recent shit and whatever, but as far as I remember, their diet does include red wine. It's, I think, 1 to 2 glasses each day, actually, which would make them, I think, a chronic drinker according to like this definition that we've gotten there. Blue zone wine. Maybe it is also about the wine. I don't fucking know. Blue Zones wine. Bluezones.com. Nice. Drink a glass or 2 of red wine daily. Sardinians drink wine moderately. Moderately. Canonau wine has 2 or 3 times the level of artery scrubbing flavonoids as other wines. So this might just be the thing. Even though, if Andrew points out that you would have to drink such an outrageously high amount of wine to get this, and I think this is about, flavonoids I think is just the category, and resveratrol, or what he's at, is like part of it, but still, would still really be interesting. Speaking, life, activity, recipes, articles, communities. Albert, beach cities, Fort Worth, and principles. Nice. Blue zones principles. Reduce healthcare costs, impact the community, transforming the system. Yeah, I actually just wanted to have that diet really quickly. I just want to have the diet. Just really, really, really quickly. Diet. There we go. Plantsland. Okay, cool. Bluezones.com. Well, there is actually an article on that, but it is an article. Plantsland. See that 95% of your food comes from a plant or plant product. How you can do it? Well, just do it. Notes on protein. In the blue zones, we have all been taught that our bodies need protein for strong bones and muscle development, but what is the right amount? The average American woman consumes 70 grams of protein daily, the average man more than 100 grams. Too much. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention recommend 46 to 56 grams per day for the average fucking American. Yes. But when you're doing sports, when you're being active, you should still get more of it, period. It is just recommends for the average. And it is definitely not too much. I mean, you can't get too much protein. It's not bad for you or whatever. And there is a lot of fucking shit around there regarding, yes, too much is bad and whatnot. Retreat from meat, which you can still do even though you need the protein. Quick and easy snacks, perfect protein pairings. Yeah, to make sure that you're getting all the amino acids. Fish is fine. Eat up to 3 ounces of fish daily, 3 ounces. Diminish dairy. Minimize your consumption of cow's milk and dairy products such as cheese, cream, and butter. Cow's milk does not figure significantly in any Blue Zones diet except that one of the Adventists, some of whom eat eggs and dairy products. In terms of the human diet, dairy is a relatively newcomer. Blah, 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 blah. Occasional egg. Eat no more than 3 eggs per week. Daily dose of beans. They eat quite a lot of, is it legumes? I don't know. No, but you know what I mean. Like beans, chickpeas, peas, whatever. / sugar. Blah, 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 blah. Snack on nuts. Sour on bread. Replace common bread with sourdough or 100% whole wheat bread. And a lot of veggies and herbs, of course. Eat super blue foods. Beans, greens, sweet potatoes, nuts, olive oil, oats, barley, fruits, green or herbal teas, and turmeric as a spice or tea. And red wine, there we go. People who drink in moderation tend to outlive those who don't. That's a great statement. A really great one. The last one for today is going to be about brain thickness.
Wish I could tell you different. Again, I'm not here to be the bearer of bad news, but the statement I just made was confirmed by Dr. David Sinclair when he was a guest on this podcast. It's confirmed by other researchers who work on resveratrol and related pathways. I wish I could tell you that red wine is good for your health. And indeed, it might be through some other mechanisms. So for instance, there have been studies of low to moderate red wine consumption. This would be anywhere from 1 to 4 glasses per week. And I don't mean enormous glasses. I mean 6-ounce glasses of red wine. And
a mega pint.
In those cases, some of the stress reduction that can be induced by consumption of red wine, maybe some of the other micronutrients and components within red wines, in particular red wines that come from particular grapes, and this gets really nuanced and frankly is not well worked out in the peer-reviewed literature, certainly not clinical trials, at least not that I'm aware of. Tell me if you're aware of a great clinical trial on this. Well, there may be some positive effects of that very low level of consumption. I'm not trying to take away anybody's red wine. I'm not trying to take away anybody's anything. I would be remiss, however, if I didn't tell you that resveratrol as the argument for drinking red wine in particular is just not a good one. It's just not supported by the peer-reviewed research. A few other things about alcohol and health. At the beginning of the episode, I referenced a study showing that indeed, not just heavy alcohol consumption of 12 to 24 or more drinks per week, but also light to moderate alcohol consumption of any type, wine, beer, spirits, etc., does reduce the thickness of the brain. It really does reduce cortical thickness. In fact, it actually scales with the amount of alcohol that people drink. And this has been well documented in a number of different studies. I can provide a link to several of these. One of the more striking ones actually shows that there's almost a dose-dependent increase in shrinkage of the gray matter volume and in these white matter tracts, these axons, these wires as it would, that connect different neurons as a function of how much alcohol people drink. And that's also what's been seen in this recent study that I referenced at the beginning and that's in the show note captions. So again, probably the best amount of alcohol to drink would be 0 glasses per week or ounces per week. For those of you drinking low amounts of alcohol, make sure you're doing other things to promote your health. And for those of you that are drinking moderate, and certainly for those of you that are heavy drinkers, please do everything you can to move away from that and to quit entirely. But even for the moderate consumers, so we've covered a lot of topics and data, risk, etc. I acknowledge of alcohol, hangover, tolerance, cancer risk, etc. I acknowledge that I've mainly talked to you about the negative effects of alcohol. I want to acknowledge that many people enjoy alcohol in moderation or even light drinking, the occasional drink or the occasional 2 drinks, or maybe even on average 1 drink per night, so 7 drinks per week. I'm certainly not here to tell you what to do and what not to do. I do find it immensely interesting, however, that first of all, alcohol is a known toxin to the cells of the body. Some of you might immediately say, well, wait, what about hormesis? What about this phenomenon where if we regularly ingest a toxin, it makes us stronger? In other words, what doesn't kill us makes us stronger. Yeah, there's, some reason to believe that might be beneficial in terms of some forms of cellular resilience. Maybe, no. Sorry, it doesn't work that way. There are processes of hormesis in which, for instance, exposing yourself safely to increases in adrenaline through ice baths or other things that increase adrenaline can raise your so-called stress threshold. But here we're talking about cellular stress and damage to cells. So my read of the literature, and again, this is my read, and I invite others to, provide studies, or I would prefer actually collections of studies that point in the direction, if they exist, that alcohol can be beneficial. But my read of the literature, or I should say, my understanding of what I would call the center of mass of the literature on alcohol is that no consumption, zero consumption of 0 ounces of alcohol is going to be better for your health than low to moderate consumption of alcohol. And that low to moderate consumption of alcohol is going to be better for you, of course, than moderately high to high alcohol consumption on the order of 12 to 24 or more drinks per week. I realize that for most people listening to this, it's probably low to moderate alcohol consumption that.
And what I've thought about just before was, is it then as bad if I drink like quite a lot on one day? And I think it actually is as worse as, because when he's saying 12 to 24 drinks per week, which is it? I just want to say it's 7 a day. No, it is not. It is quite something. It is the same if I am drinking them across 3 days or 7 days, and if I'm drinking them on 1 day. Of course, it is not a habit then, just because I'm doing it, I don't know, once a month and whatever. But it still isn't good if I'm having once a month like my 24 fucking rings. Might actually still be the same as this spread across 1 month entirely, even though you might then have certain drawbacks in or regarding other mechanisms than period. Maybe, for example, muscle growth
is part of their standard repertoire, and I'm not here to give you justification for doing that, nor am I going to tell you not to do that. I would like you to consider perhaps, however, the negative effects that we understand and that are documented. For instance, the negative effects of alcohol and the gut microbiome and the things that you can do to better support your gut microbiome. The negative effects on the stress system, that HPA axis that we talked about earlier, and the fact that even low to moderate levels of alcohol consumption can increase our levels of stress when we're not drinking. And to think about acquiring some tools and, getting some proficiency with tools, behavioral or otherwise, that can help you with stress modulation that don't involve alcohol consumption. So again, the point here is to illustrate where the problems lie with alcohol consumption, but also what I've tried to do is to point you to some resources that can help offset some of those negative effects. Will they offset all the effects? I can't say that for sure, but...
And so on and so forth. Gonna end the episode for today. I hope that I've been able to spotlight, or Andrew has been able to spotlight certain ideas and thoughts of importance for you. And we're gonna see you the next time. So, bye-bye.